Hello everyone. Today we are looking at a game from 1978 from Tbilisi. Gary Kasparov with the white pieces versus Alexander Beliavsky with the black pieces. These two would go on to test greatness, of course, with Gary becoming a world champion. Alexander Beliavsky becoming a candidate challenger, one of the strongest players in the world. Gary here with the white pieces started off with the c4. Beliavsky e6, knight f3, knight f6, and now we'll see some transposition here from the English after knight c3, d5, d4, and now we have a queen's gambit decline. And now Beliavsky was a renowned specialist, or is a renowned specialist in the Tartakower variation in the queen's gambit decline, and that's what we'll see here. That's noted by the fianchetto of the bishop on b7. So after bishop h4, b6, and there's different ways that white usually responds. Sometimes white will capture the knight immediately after the bishop commits itself already to b7, and sometimes the bishop will capture on f6 even before, but the knight is not committed here yet. So normally you will see, as in the game, white will wait until the bishop is actually committed to b7. So another normal move would be like bishop d3, bishop b7, and then the capture here. Kasparov, way back in 1978, just simply plays queen b3 and bishop b7. And now that the bishop is committed itself here, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and then c takes d5, e takes d5. And now you can see the bishop is kind of stuck behind this pawn here. Now, on a side note, if you play the Kali system, Zukertort variation, this right here is basically for black, that is like a reverse variation of that. Of course, there are slight differences because you are technically behind in black, and white is able to start attacking the center earlier with c4, etc. But one of the things I do is I play this as black, and then as white, I will play the Kali Zukertort variation with b3 because the positions are quite similar. I have a feel for the setup. Now as black, of course, is a little more dangerous being a tempo behind. And in this particular opening, you have to be willing to accept isolated pawns, hanging pawns at some point. Now you get good piece play, but you have to, make your concession or choose your poison, so to speak. And b7, bishop to b7, let me point out, is basically dealing with the age-old problem for black in the queen's gambit decline, which is what to do with that light square bishop. So here, black accepts some weakness in the pawn structure in order to free his pieces. So the game continued, rook d1, and already by piling up on the d file, and now you can also see idea with queen b3, knight c3, and rook d1, of course. Beautiful coordination here by Kasparov, and it's all in anticipation of black's break eventually of c5, which will lead to hanging pawns, isolated pawn. Notice that in this case with the bishop unprotected here, after c5, d takes c5, black cannot connect his pawns because this bishop will be hanging. Game continued, rook e8 from Beliavsky, bishop d3, and now c5, so black gets the break he wants. D takes c5, and here notice Beliavsky cannot capture, so he just simply plays knight d7, and Kasparov plays c6 here. He could have captured here, but black is again playing for activity, and he would just play knight c5 here, attacking the queen, and then say after queen b4, then queen takes b6. Queen b6 is possible. Then you can throw bishop takes c3 in there. And although white, and let's preserve the bishop and this pawn on a2. And so although white is a pawn up here, black is able to generate enough activity in order to compensate fully for the pawn. So now, for example, if white is just bent on just trying to preserve his material advantage, he will find himself in difficulties rather quickly. And here, black will win back the pawn by force due to sheer piece activity. So let's go back. So after d takes c5, knight d7, and Kasparov realizes just to give the pawn back, and he does on his own terms though. So c6, bishop takes c6, and at this point, let me just say, without great analysis or deep analysis rather, the position is equal. But again, black has an isolated pawn, and of course he hopes to compensate for that with his bishop pair. So again, in exchange for piece activity and bishop pair, black has to accept this weakness of the isolated pawn, or potential weakness rather, because isolated pawn can be a strength and a weakness. Here, Kasparov castles. Let me just show you that this knight d5 here would just be met by knight c5 here, check of course, and then queen takes f6, and then again the activity of black is just too much. Let's say for example queen c2, then just knight takes, queen takes, bishop takes f3 is possible here, or continuing the activity with rook a d8. And again, the activity of black compensates for the pawn deficit. This is why Kasparov just continues on. He castles, knight c5 anyway, queen a3, and now Beliavsky decides to jettison this pawn by playing d4. Now, of course, he wants to open up the position. I get it. Maybe more accurate was a move like a5 or queen d6. So he played d4, and you'll see what takes place because white, Kasparov, is actually able to start to gain initiative here. So knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, e takes d4. Just note that queen takes d4 is not possible because the bishop will check on h7, and then white will win the king. But his idea was to play this move, queen g5, attacking here. And again, notice that black is all about activity here. So if he could just win the pawn back some other way, it would be great. He's gotten rid of his weakness, has his free piece play. The problem of the light square bishop on c8 is solved. What more can you ask for? So right now it's just a matter of white being able to refute black's concept. So this is what Kasparov is up against. So here, of course, he just simply plays d5, and black has the same dilemma where he can't take the pawn at this moment due to the loss of the queen that would ensue. So bishop d7, bishop drops to e2 here. Now a5 from Beliavsky, bishop f3, protecting the pawn. So black has to be careful because although his pieces are free and well placed, white is just up a pawn, right? So does black have enough compensation in this position to justify being down a pawn? Probably not. Game continued. Queen f4, knight e2, queen b4 from Beliavsky offering the trade of queens, and Kasparov plays knight d4. Now he could have taken queen takes b4 and a takes b4 and double black's pawns, and then you can see that this rook comes alive on the a file. Only way to really defend that, I mean, rook a1 is possible, but it makes white's pieces a little less active, and knight c1 for the same reason. It's possible, but again, black is a little less active. But this was a good move, and black would still have to prove compensation, being material down and fractured pawn structure. But again, you have to think of the style of the player. Maybe Korchnoi or Karpov would have played a move like this. Knight c1, just patiently holding on to the material, right? But a player like Kasparov, he's all about dynamism, and he wants to keep active as possible, and also not allow his opponent any counterplay. So he plays knight d4. Beliavsky takes, queen takes, b takes a3, and now, although Beliavsky is down material, he feels he may have some compensation in that the white pawns are now damaged. So knight e4 here, h4 by Kasparov. Of course, this creates some luft for the king and gains some space on the queen side, and it also prevents the knight from retreating to g5 and attacking this bishop here on f3, and say driving it off into a less active location. Rook a c8. Again, black being a pawn down has to show some kind of compensation for it and be as active as possible. The problem is that white is also equally active, so therefore black doesn't really have a lot of compensation, because it's not like white is not active also. The only glimmer of hope for black is that white's pawns on the a file are a glaring weakness in the position, and this gives black hope where he can attack these pawns. So knight d6, blockading the d pawn, and so Kasparov exchanges rooks, and now rook b1, attacking the b pawn. Of course, knight c4 attacks a3 and protects b6. Rook c1, knight d2, and now bishop e2. Rook comes down to e4 again. Beliavsky's being very active here. Rook c7, and this activity has given Beliavsky some form of compensation. Bishop g4, and now bishop takes g4, rook takes d4. Okay, so he decides to take the knight. The problem is, if he grabs the bishop, then after rook takes g4, then knight f5 is a little bit problematic for black here. So let's just say let's give a move to black, right? King h7 and then d6. See how the knight protects itself and also protects the advancing pawn. Also keeps the rook off of d4. So this is why this is very difficult. So this is why Beliavsky took the knight. That way he can also get behind this passed pawn. Now here is my favorite part of the game. I could have actually started the video from here, but I wanted you to see the unfolding of the contest. My favorite part here is this ending. So Kasparov recognizes that the weakest piece for black is his knight. And the reason why is because the black knight does not have adequate or sufficient outposts um, to really attack from. The knight is kind of like a hanging piece. The only thing that's watching over that knight is that rook. All right. So Beliavsky has to be careful with his knight deep in the white territory. Right. So what Beliavsky, of course, wants to do is stay active, but as a position is wide open, this allows Kasparov to become active also. So from here on out, we'll see Kasparov playing against this knight on d2. So here it is. First move here is just simply bishop e2. Okay, and if you notice, the squares, the knight really doesn't have any squares to go to. So for instance, the rook is on c7 here, the bishop here. There's no way for the knight to go here. The knight can't go there. All right. The knight, the knight has problematic uh, a problematic task here in finding out where to go exactly. All right. So for example, knight b1 can be met by rook c1. Then let's just make a random move. Knight takes a3. Then rook c1 check. Here. Rook c3. And you can see, again, the knight is in hot water. So let's say the knight goes back. Rook d3. And let's say he doesn't want to trade rooks. But just for demonstration purposes, you can see the idea. And even if he doesn't trade rooks, it's the same thing. So if he goes to e4, for example, he's attacking this bishop, but then you just push d6 and then the pawn will queen. All right. So it's a lot of it's a simple looking position, but there's a lot going on here, and it mostly revolves around this weak piece, bishop versus knight. So Beliavsky evens the material. So rook takes d5. So he's been fighting against this isolated pawn, this pass pawn, extra pawn that white has had for a long time. So now Beliavsky has evened the material, and now it's white with the weakness on a2 and a3. So basically, if Beliavsky can figure out what to do with his knight, he has good chances of possibly winning those pawns and maybe even going for a win at some point. All right, so he has to just kind of figure out what he's gonna do here. So of course Beliavsky knows his knight is weak. Kasparov knows it, and so the strategy is beautiful, revolving around this. This explains Kasparov's next move, f3. Now the knight can't escape via e4 or use that square anymore. So Beliavsky, seeing the difficulties at hand, he decides that it's best to go for the trade of rooks here. Let me show you some alternatives. Again, we return to this move, knight b1. Okay, it's possible. Right? I'm not saying it's a bad move, but white gets a bit active here. So for example, bishop c4, and you can see attack coming against the f7 square. And of course, if he tries to protect that square with the rook, then again, the old tried and true skewer tactics, right, will come through and for white. And that just gives you an example of the activity that black can pursue. Of course, instead of doing a move like that, rook c5 is possible, but then just simply bishop takes f7 check, king f8, and so on. Rook d7, knight takes a3, bishop a6, threatening rook f7, etc. Knight c4, rook f7. So black is still in the mix, but again, you can see the activity and pressure that white is getting in the position. Another idea is, and probably the better idea is probably just king f8. The idea is that although exchanging the rooks limits the activity of white, of course, it also limits black's activity. So what I'm saying here is that by keeping the rooks on, yes, white has a rook on the 7th, but black also has the ability to activate his rook. As long as white is not mating black, black can try to get active with his rook. The reason why I think this is important is because you must think when you're trading pieces, or you must ask yourself the question, are my remaining pieces better? So after the rooks are gone and you compare the bishop to the knight, it's no brainer. The knight doesn't have any outposts and really can't threaten anything in the position, because anywhere that knight lands, it's susceptible to being kicked out. The king can literally walk right up to the knight has to move because there's really no landing spots. The best outpost black has in the position is on c5, which is barely on the border of white's territory. With that thought, and I might have wanted to keep the rooks on, but it's understandable because Kasparov has a rook on the 7th rank, had to worry about moves like bishop c4 at some point, etc. So it makes sense to do that. So I can see Beliavsky's viewpoint also. Plus, you want to free the knight so that the knight can, say, go to b1 and attack a3. Right now, the knight is on d2 where it can cover the c4 square, so that move is not possible. So what actually happened in the game was rook c5. So Kasparov takes, and now you see that the remaining pieces are better for white. However, Beliavsky has a dangerous passed pawn, and let's see how Kasparov deals with it. So now bishop d3. Bishop d3 actually stops this move for now. Bishop d1. And again, all of this plays against this knight. However, Beliavsky's idea, he's seen deep into the position. He just simply plays c4. He's pushing this pawn. Bishop c2. c3. And now he moves the king out. King f2. And now finally the knight gets out and gets to attack. So knight c4, king e2, knight takes a3. So to me, this is a fantastic battle of ideas. How Kasparov is actually playing against a piece, the knight, and Beliavsky is recognizing that, and he comes up with his idea to counter. Nevertheless, the piece is what it is. The piece is weak. King d3, knight b5, and now simply just a4, and Kasparov drives the knight away. And this is what I was saying, is that the knight is a liability in this position, and king takes c3. Now, unfortunately, the game ended here because I think Beliavsky realized that there was little hope in the position. These players are so strong because so strong that sometimes they don't play out positions that we as regular lay people would like to see them play. I would definitely like to see the continuation. However, I think Beliavsky resigned here because the white king is just so close to the a pawn that he would just simply basically walk over and win the a pawn. So for example, let's say king f8, then king c4. Of course, this knight is guarding. Let's say knight e6. Idea maybe to come there. King b6. Let's just throw that in there. Knight f4. g4. King to d6. And king takes a5. So that was just a sample variation that I basically came off the top of my head with, but I'm sure that that's how the game would look in a few moves, where white would win this pawn on the a file. Let's go back to the end of the game. Um, where white would win this pawn on the a file, and there wouldn't be anything really that black can do constructively to stop the pawn. So Beliavsky resigned. And to me, this game is one of the great examples. I mean, there's many thousands of examples in chess, but this game to me is one of the great, clear examples of bishop versus knight, strong bishop versus weak knight, of course, and also the idea of playing against a piece. There's a book written by Gligerich back in the day called "I Play Against Pieces," and that's what it's talking about. It's sometimes there's a weak piece in the position, and the whole strategy of the game will center around that. And this is a example. Another example that I can think of off the top of my head is Anatoly Karpov versus Wolfgang Unziger. I think I want to say 1974. I might be wrong, but he plays against a knight also in that game. The whole strategy revolves around that weak link in the chain, so to speak. So that is it for this video. Please like and subscribe and comment. I would love to hear your thoughts about this game and any questions, so that I might field them and answer them. Also, check the links below. Please um, check it for DVDs, right? On these openings, and books if you still read books on chess. Uh, that's like not many people still use books anymore, but those links are below also. And please, most importantly, please feel free to donate and support this channel, and also hit all the buttons, notifications, like, subscribe, etc., so that my video will be moved along in the YouTube algorithm. And I'll see you soon on the next video.